One weather station recorded no rain for 401 consecutive years, from 1570 to 1971. Not a single drop. Think about what that means. You're looking at the driest non-polar desert on the planet. A place so barren, so utterly alien, that NASA comes here to test its rovers for missions to Mars. This landscape of salt and stone stretches for 1,600 kilometers. The soil chemistry is so hostile, it actively destroys organic matter. And yet, over 1 million people live here. They have built cities like Iquique and Antofagasta, clinging to the edge of this impossible land. They work, they raise families, they survive. How? The official climate data presents a paradox, a biological dead end that somehow supports a thriving population. But the data is missing something, and the numbers measure rain that falls from the sky. They do not measure the water that flows through it. Every morning, a ghost river rolls in from the Pacific Ocean. A thick, wet fog the locals call the Camanchaca. It silently pushes inland, blanketing the scorched earth in a cool, damp shroud. This isn't rain, it's something else entirely. It's born from a perfect set of conditions. The cold Humboldt Current running up the coast of South America chills the air above it, condensing moisture into a dense fog bank. To the east, the towering Andes Mountains create a formidable wall, blocking any rain from the Amazon basin. The Atacama is trapped in the middle, a prisoner of its own geography, and the fog is its only hope. So, how do you drink a cloud? And here's where human ingenuity becomes extraordinary. You build a trap. Here you see these vast nets stretched between poles on the hillsides. They are fog catchers. Each one is a fine polypropylene mesh designed to intercept the wind-driven fog. As the microscopic droplets of water pass through, they cling to the fibers. They merge. They grow heavy. Gravity takes over. The water drips down into a system of pipes and troughs. A single large array, about 100 square meters, can harvest thousands of liters of water on a good day. Enough for an entire village to drink, to wash, to grow food where no food should grow. They had found a way to drink the sky. But this impossible water held a secret that could kill them just as surely as thirst. The secret isn't in the water from the sky, it's in the ground beneath your feet. The fog arrives as some of the purest water on Earth, distilled by the ocean and the sun. But the moment it touches the Atacama soil, it becomes a poison. A patient poison. Arsenic. Yes, you heard that right. Arsenic. The rock and soil of this desert are laced with it, a natural consequence of the region's volcanic geology. Any river flowing from the Andes, any well drilled into the earth, draws up this invisible killer. The World Health Organization states that safe drinking water should contain no more than 10 micrograms of arsenic per liter. Some water sources in the Atacama have tested at over 1,000. That's 100 times the safe limit. Think about what that means for a family, drinking that water every single day. The official histories focus on the great copper mines. They celebrate the nitrate boom of the 19th century. They don't spend much time on the hospital records. And this isn't a new problem. This curse is ancient. In the 1980s, archaeologist Bernardo Arriaza began studying the Chinchorro mummies, some of the oldest artificially preserved human remains ever found. They date back over 7,000 years. He took samples of their hair. A single strand can hold the chemical history of a person's life. What he found was staggering. The arsenic levels were 20 to 30 times higher than in modern populations. They found it in men, women, and in the hair of stillborn infants. For thousands of years, the people of the Atacama faced a terrible choice: die quickly from thirst, or die from the water that kept them alive. And nobody ever asks the most obvious question: why on earth did they stay? The choice became even starker in the modern era. In the 1950s, the city of Antofagasta was booming. It needed water, lots of it. So, in 1957, engineers completed an ambitious pipeline, channeling water from the Tocantins and Holajar rivers high in the Andes. They had solved the water shortage, or so they thought. What they didn't know, or what some chose to ignore, was that this new water supply carried unprecedented levels of arsenic. For the next 12 years, from 1958 to 1970, the entire city drank poisoned water. Nearly 150,000 people. The consequences were catastrophic. A team of epidemiologists later found that death rates from bladder cancer increased 7-fold, lung cancer 4-fold. It was one of the most severe mass arsenic poisoning events in modern history. And it happened because they tried to bring life to the desert. This part of the story is often reduced to a footnote in the grand narrative of industrial progress. And here is where our ghost river, the Camanchaca, re-enters the story. Because the water harvested by those fog nets is unique. It's almost perfectly pure. It hasn't had a chance to touch the contaminated soil. It is the one truly safe source of water in the entire desert. It's the solution. Simple, elegant, sitting right there in the air. But look at the scale. A large fog-catching array might produce 5,000 liters a day. Enough for a small village? A modern city like Antofagasta consumes over 100 million liters every single day. You would need to cover entire mountains in nets, an impossible task. So you have a paradox. The fog provides purity, but not volume. The rivers provide volume, but not purity. One is safe but scarce, the other is plentiful but poisoned. So how do you sustain 1 million people in a place that is actively trying to kill them with every sip? What choice do you make? Safe but scarce, or plentiful but poisoned? For decades, that was the entire equation, a terrible, unsolvable problem. And then they decided to reject the choice entirely. They turned away from the ghost river in the sky and the poisoned rivers from the mountains. They turned to the one place left, the Pacific Ocean. The solution wasn't elegant, it was brute force. It's called reverse osmosis desalination. Think of it like a microscopic filter, so fine that water molecules can pass through, but salt and arsenic cannot. Simple in concept, immensely difficult in practice. You have to push seawater against these membranes with enormous pressure, over 60 times normal atmospheric pressure. It is a loud, power-hungry, industrial process that wages war on the very nature of water. And here, in the driest place on Earth, they built some of the largest desalination plants in the world. The Antofagasta plant, which came online in stages starting in the early 2000s, is a sprawling complex of pipes, pumps, and energy infrastructure. It looks less like a water utility and more like a power station, because that's what it is, a machine that converts raw energy into clean water. Its capacity, over 198 million liters of fresh water, every single day, enough to supply the entire city and then some. For the first time in its history, Antofagasta had a source of water that was both plentiful and pure. The arsenic problem, which had plagued the city since 1958, was finally solved at the tap. The cancer rates began to fall. The long civic nightmare was over. It was a miracle of modern engineering, a victory. But victory always comes at a price. And here's the part nobody discusses in the official press releases. To produce that much fresh water requires a staggering amount of electricity. It accounts for up to 50% of the plant's total operating cost. Where does that power come from? You are in a desert, a perfect place for solar. Yet for years, the primary sources were coal and natural gas power plants built right on the coast. You solve an arsenic problem by creating an air pollution problem. It's the first clue that this bargain is not as clean as the water it produces. And then there is the waste. Pay close attention to this, because for every liter of fresh water you make, you are left with about 1.5 liters of something else. A toxic, super-concentrated, salty sludge called brine. What do you do with millions of liters of it every day? Heck, you pump it right back into the ocean. The promotional videos show a clean pipe releasing clear water. The reality is far more damaging. This brine is much denser and saltier than normal seawater. It doesn't mix easily. It sinks. It creeps along the ocean floor like an invisible, suffocating blanket. It kills kelp forests. It drives away fish. It creates vast underwater dead zones where nothing can survive. The official environmental impact statements call it managed discharge. A 2019 study published in the journal Water Research found these brine plumes can extend for kilometers, fundamentally altering the coastal ecosystem. This data is not easy to find. It is not part of the public tour. You are saving a city on land by systematically killing the ocean beside it. And here is the final, brutal twist. On the part that changes the entire story. Who do you think is the biggest customer for this expensive, energy-intensive, environmentally destructive water? The people of Antofagasta? No, it's the mining companies. The giant copper and lithium mines high in the Andes are the primary clients. They use a colossal amount of water to extract minerals from the poisoned earth. So the solution to a public health crisis caused by naturally occurring arsenic has become a subsidized utility for multinational corporations to pull more heavy metals out of the ground. The people get the water they need to survive. But the system they built now primarily serves the very industry that profits from the desert's curse. They've traded one poison for another, but that is a transaction for economists and engineers. On the ground, for the people who live here, the trade feels very different. It has a face and a name. Meet Carlos. He is 62 years old. His hands are maps of a life spent on the water, scarred by nets and hooks. He has been a fisherman out of the port of Antofagasta since he was a boy. He remembers when the bay was a kaleidoscope of life. Now he points to the water. It looks clean, but it isn't. The brine from the desalination plant sinks to the seafloor, unseen. The official term is managed discharge. For Carlos, it's just el veneno silencioso, the silent poison. A 2019 study confirmed that the salinity in the discharge zone is 7% higher than normal seawater. Think about what that means. For the kelp forests that were once nurseries for fish, it is a chemical desert. For Carlos, it means his nets come up empty, day after day. He isn't fighting a corporation, he's fighting a ghost, an invisible blanket that is suffocating his past and his future. And here's the part that keeps him awake at night. The system that is destroying his livelihood is the same one that provides the clean water his grandchildren drink. He is trapped. Now travel 30 kilometers inland. Here, the air is thick with dust from the Escondida copper mine, the largest on Earth. You meet Javier. He's a mechanic, servicing the colossal trucks that haul ore 24 hours a day. His home in Antofagasta has clean running water thanks to the desalination plant. His salary, paid by the mine, gives his children a life he never had. The mine he works for is the plant's single biggest customer, consuming millions of liters of that desalinated water every day. He knows about the fishermen. He sees the smog from the coal-fired power plants on the coast that help power the entire operation. He understands the trade. In a way, his own body is the ledger where the costs are written. The water he drinks is pure. The air he breathes is not. And here is where the story gets complicated. You can't paint Javier as a villain. He is a father. He is doing what anyone would do, providing for his family in the only way this land allows. He has simply accepted a bargain that Carlos cannot. But there is a third story, a quieter one. High on a coastal mountain, away from the city and the mines, you find a small community called Peña Blanca. Here, you meet Daria. She isn't fighting the desert. She's partnering with it. She tends to the fog nets, the camanchaca. Every morning, she checks the troughs, listening to the steady drip of pure water harvested from the air. A single one of her panels can collect 200 liters on a good day. It is enough. Enough for her family to drink. Enough for a small garden of stubborn vegetables. Her water creates no pollution. It pumps no brine into the sea. It requires no fossil fuels. It is a quiet, elegant act of survival. But it cannot sustain a city. It cannot power a mine. Her solution is seen as a relic, a charming but irrelevant piece of history. The official reports barely mention it. Why? Because it cannot be scaled. It cannot be sold. It cannot be owned in the same way. So you are left with 3 lives, defined by 3 waters. Carlos, with his poisoned ocean. Javier, with his industrial water paid for by a poisoned sky. And Daria, with her pure water from a ghost river that cannot save everyone. Their children will inherit this desert. One will inherit an empty sea. Another, a scarred mountain. And the last, a fading tradition. And the question is no longer about engineering or economics. It's about them. If you had to choose a future for them, which would it be? Which would it be? The choice seems obvious. You choose Daria. You choose the fog nets, the clean, quiet water that asks nothing of the earth. It feels pure. It feels right. But think about what that choice really means. It means the cities shrink, the mines close, the economy that supports over 1 million people vanishes. You are choosing a past that cannot support the present. And here's the part no one wants to admit. To choose Daria's future for everyone is to condemn thousands, perhaps hundreds of thousands, to leave. So you turn back to the machine, the industrial solution. The desalination plant is a promise of stability, of jobs, of a future where cities can grow in the driest place on Earth. In 2017, the Escondida mine signed a new contract for desalinated water, securing its supply for the next several decades. This path is locked in. The decision has already been made, far away from the fishing boats and fog nets. But what kind of future does it lock in? Look closer at the architecture of these new systems. The water is now a commodity, centrally controlled and sold to the highest bidder. The communities have become customers. They have traded a dependence on poison nature for a dependence on a corporate machine. And the machine has its own thirst, a thirst for energy, for profit, for constant growth. The official projections show a doubling of desalination capacity along this coast by 2030. The brine plumes will widen, the dead zones will spread. Creeping death just out of sight. You solve one problem by creating another, bigger one, and then you call it progress. So the two paths diverge. One, a return to a past that can no longer sustain the population. The other, a march toward a future that may poison the planet. This isn't just a story about the Atacama. It is a perfect miniature of the choice facing all of us. Between the small, the sustainable, and the local. And the massive, the powerful, and the global. We tell ourselves we can have both. We tell ourselves that technology will find a third way. But here, in the clarity of the desert, you can see the bargain with no illusions. Every drop of clean water has a cost, written somewhere on the land, in the sea, or in the air. The desert doesn't judge. It simply records the consequences. It remembers everything. And one day, it will present the bill. The water that flows through this land holds the memory of every choice. I'm the arsenic from the mountains, the salt from the machines, the purity of the fog. It is all one story, flowing toward